A huge warm welcome to everybody joining us for this third of our autumn series with ChatterStars and Bookmark collaborating on all things reading. We are really delighted to have lots of you joining us today. Thank you for coming along, and we're going to be looking at building fluency for the next 30 minutes or so, and then there'll be some time for Q&A at the end should you have any questions. So huge warm welcome. Let's get going. Who says?
Oh, there you go. I think it was just popping our names up at the bottom.
There we go. Cool. Did that move on for you?
Yeah, it has. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to have a look at a little bit around the background of fluency in terms of the research, so that we know that what we are suggesting has real roots in evidence, because that's really vital for us in education. We need to know that what we are doing has evidential research and tangible reasons for doing so. So we're going to have a little look at that and some of the key researchers around fluency and the importance of teaching fluency in reading. We're going to have a look at what it means to be a fluent speaker and how that moves us to become fluent readers. That whole concept of vocabulary really underpins comprehension in reading, and that's how we know children understand things, is when they are able to read fluently and with expression, they're showing comprehension, and that sort of all roots back to that vocabulary, which is why ChatterStars and Bookmark are so aligned in our mission. We'll look at some key ways in particular to build fluency. Lauren's going to do that with you and pick up on some examples threaded through as we go, so that it feels very real. I've sat in too many training sessions where you think, well, yeah, all right, but what does that look like next Tuesday afternoon when it's raining? And that's always at the heart of my thinking when I'm running training, is what does that look like next Tuesday afternoon with year 4, with year 9, on a grubby, wet afternoon? How is that going to help? So I hope that you feel that by the end of this session, we've ticked a lot of those boxes for you. Okay, so let's really focus on why we read, first of all, because fluency is absolutely critical, but actually there's a reason behind that, and it's much more to do with our soul, in my view, and in the view of Henry Miller. That last bullet point there tells us that Henry Miller, a very famous author, felt we should read to give our souls a chance to luxuriate. I love that. I love that quote. The concept that we are luxuriating in this world of story, and it really is what we need, especially on a wet, dark November evening. This is where we want to be. We want to be in a world of words and story, because it's a place we can explore who we are, as well as all sorts of other elements of story about other people and other worlds. J.K. Rowling links the word of magic to reading, and in fact, her tagline is part of our Twitter tagline about the magic that happens when you read and bringing words to life. And Donna Tartt, who wrote The Goldfinch, I think, as well as many others, says that the books she loved in childhood are almost become a part of her. They're more inside her than they are out. And I think that's a really interesting idea, isn't it? That there are stories out there, there are books that, especially when we've come across them in childhood, which is such a critical time to create these formative memories and these formative experiences that become part of us. They become part of our story, the stories of others. And for me, I think that that's one of the most critical elements to reading, and to be familiarizing yourself with a world of story and a world of books, because it really helps us tell our own story through the words of others and through what we experience. So that's just a little prelude to where we're going, to help you think about what is it that authors say about reading, because great authors are almost always great readers. Okay, so Professor Timothy Shanahan is a huge advocate of fluency, and in fact he's got a great website. If you just Google his name and fluency, you will come across his website, where you can find endless ideas and resources and blogs around fluency. So do check that out. It's really helpful for us in wherever we are as as a family, as a teacher, as a tutor, working as a volunteer, all of those elements you'll find helpful. And he says that actually the only reason we should be looking at this instructional routine is because there's a lot of studies out there that say it really enhances reading achievement. If we get fluency right, reading achievement rockets. It really does. And there's a substantial number of studies out there that really do demonstrate that. He also says that teaching fluency helps reading development by a wide range of measures. They simply read better if they've had fluency teaching than those children who did not. So that's a real win for all of us. And it really aids decoding development. So for both struggling readers and those more confident readers, when you look at how to apply that phonics skill, there is a real blossoming, as Timothy Shanahan calls it, in that reading ability, because it aids their decoding skill. And that familiarizing and that ease that we have in sight words. Once we can read words by sight, and that decoding development has morphed into our ability to read on sight, then we feel a real sense of achievement that we suddenly can really blossom as readers. So it's a really important element to looking at fluency is why we do it. And then when you come across the magic of language in a poem like this, you can run with it. You can literally join that train that this poem suggests and become that fluent reader that can articulate the pace and the energy needed behind the words, because words mean so much more than marks on a page, don't they? That we bring them to life in dramatic readings and in dramatic portrayals of the story that they narrate. So I'm going to have a quick go. It's one of my favorites, this one, but it sounds like the train. And in fact, certainly the more you move up through education, we encourage our children to really look for how does the structure mirror or echo the narrative? How does the structure and the pace and the punctuation, how does that mirror the narrative? And here it's really clear, and it's the fluency that enables us to see that. So it's the Robert Louis Stevenson poem From a Railway Carriage. Faster than fairies, faster than witches, bridges and houses, hedges and ditches, and charging along like troops in a battle, all through the meadows, the horses and cattle. All of the sights of the hill and the plain fly as thick as driving rain, and ever again in the wink of an eye, painted stations whistle by.
Very good.
There's lots more to that, but you can have so much fun picking out little tiny extracts, and you could give that stanza, it's only one stanza of I think about eight in that poem. You could give just two lines, to different groups, and you could bounce that around the classroom, you could bounce that around a small group, you could really engage your classes with dramatic readings that bring out fluency. And it might be that some of your weaker, more struggling readers are really pulled along with that because they can memorize, and it begins to be something other than the struggle of reading, and it begins to be much more about the imagination and bringing something to life and making it sound like the train going by, because that's what this is trying to emulate. So we're just giving you a few little examples of things you might want to use, but that's a lovely one to bring out the concept of fluency. And this is the key to fluency. This is from the Education Endowment Foundation Improving Literacy at Key Stage 2 report, which is really useful read. And they say that it's the combination of these three elements that give us fluency. It's the accuracy, reading words correctly. It's the automaticity, lovely word. I've had to practice saying that a few times before I came on this webinar. That automatic, effortless ability to read a word, and that's where that sight vocabulary really helps us. And it's the prosody, and we've talked about this in our previous webinars, but that concept that we are bringing to the words on the page a drama of pace and volume and smoothness and phrasing to make our reading sound like speech. That's what we're trying to do. Very much it's that fluent speaker, fluent reader concept. In fact, I was in a meeting yesterday, or an event yesterday, and lots of people were contributing, and then somebody got up and wanted to read her contribution, and I, entirely reasonable to do so, but actually that lacked the nature of speech that makes it engaging. So there is a real connection between fluent speaker, fluent reader, that is really interesting to unpick and think about. But those are the three elements that build up to a fluent reader who has fluency in their speech. And something I wondered that might really help, and again, this is from a very learned Professor Tim Rosinski, who has a lot to say on fluent reading. And if you simply Google his name again, you will come up with lots of his ideas, and he's got his own website around fluency. But he has, and this is a sort of a pre-seed version of it, he has a fluency rubric that I think is really quite helpful. And I would probably use this with my class or with my small group, and maybe even rewrite it in a more pupil speak, perhaps, or get pupils to think, how would you phrase this? What does that look like? And maybe get them to design their own. But what's nice about this is that there's a progression line for each of those key elements of fluency, for expression and volume, for phrasing, for smoothness, and for pace. We know what that looks like to get better. And it allows us to identify quite specifically how to move from being in the 1 column to being in the 3 column, and then hopefully getting to the 4 column. And you can see in the 4 column things like reads at a conversational pace throughout the reading. And there again, it's making that link between being a fluent speaker and a fluent reader, because by bringing words off a page fluently, we're making them sound a lot like talk, that naturally occurring speech that we can't tell if someone's reading or not, almost. And what's quite cool here is we've got scores. Okay, so this will appeal to anybody who likes to have a bit of a competitive edge potentially, or wants to better their own score over time. Rosinski is advocating that a score of 10 or more indicates the students making good progress in fluency. Less than 10, they could do with a bit of a boost. So you might use this as a baseline in your classroom. You might use this as something to help, group work. Maybe they're going to peer assess or self-assess. Sorry, that's my black lab because my kids have just come home from school. So you can use this in a number of different ways, and it might be that you use it with pupil speak, or you just keep it as is, or go online and find a few more. There's lots of ones that you could choose from. But the concept is really good, that we've got something to hang on to about what does it look like to get better at fluency. So have a look for those, or use this one. This webinar is going to be posted on our YouTube channel later, so you can have a look at it there, and we'll send it once you've registered. You get this sent on email as well, so you'll have it at your disposal. And I think now we're hopping over to Lauren.
We are indeed, thank you. Thanks for that, Helen. So what I wanted to do is kind of take each of those elements that's in Rosinski's kind of rubric for fluency and show you what that might look like in terms of activities you can do with young people to help develop their fluency. So I just wanted to show you this quote, not necessarily to read it out, but just to kind of emphasize again what Helen said about that link between fluent speech and fluent reading, and the fact that if we can develop fluency in children, that means that their understanding, their comprehension, their decoding, everything kind of comes along with that as well. So I just thought it was a really nice way to show that reading does become more engaging and meaningful as well. So I've got a few sort of activities to show you in terms of expression and volume. I will say that all of the activities that I'm showing, I try to kind of link them in with each of the elements of fluency, but actually they can probably be effective for all of the different elements, but I was trying to kind of link it particularly with different aspects. So for example, expression, I found these really lovely ideas online about DIY expression sticks. So we've all seen, you know, the lollipop sticks you get, particularly in classrooms, that they're used quite frequently. And the idea of giving children a passage and then choosing at random a lollipop stick that says read it like a robot, read it like a pirate, read it like a monster is really, really lovely. It makes it really fun. It makes it very engaging for the children. They can joke about, they can laugh about it. They can do it in pairs to begin with if they want to, so it's a bit more a bit less intimidating. You can have children stand up at the front of the class if they want to do that, and they could just play around with reading, and that really focuses on their expression, because it really makes them think about how they're saying the words and why they're saying it in a particular way. You could have comparisons between one robot child and another robot child and see how they kind of read things differently, and kind of unpick that sort of those little fluency elements within it as well. So I thought that was a really lovely idea. We've then got the idea in the sort of the yellow box down the bottom left-hand corner about emphasising certain words and showing how it can change the meaning. So with the sentence, Olivia wanted to practice piano after school, you could give the children a sentence to read and then highlight different words and then talk to them about how the meaning changes. So for example, you might have the last one, Olivia wanted to practice piano after school. Emphasising the word after school makes you kind of wonder, okay, so when did she actually practice piano? She wanted to practice it after school, but does that mean that it happened before school? Does that mean it happened at another time? Did it mean that she didn't get to practice it at all? And it kind of gets the child to talk through the meaning and think about why that word's been emphasised, and gets them to start thinking about that. And then you can have a discussion about how in novels quite often you have words in italics, and what does that mean? How would you read those slightly differently? How have you changed your voice to emphasise that word as well? So I thought that was a really lovely activity. And then at the top right one, we've got the sentence, it's wet play today. And you can do this with pretty much any sentence and give an emotion wheel, or just give, you know, a few different emotions. It doesn't have to be a wheel like this, and then see if the children can read that sentence showing that emotion. So I wonder if there is anyone in our lovely audience that would that would like the chance to just read the sentence, it's wet play today, choose an emotion, don't tell us what emotion it is, and then we can guess how you're feeling about it. Is there anyone feeling sort of brave enough? You can
let me unmute everybody, hang on.
So you can either just speak and we hopefully will be able to see you, or you can type in the chat bar if you would like to have a go and we can kind of ask you, or you can put your hand up on the reactions if there is anybody. Otherwise I might have to.
How do I unmute everybody, Lauren?
Can they unmute themselves at the moment?
I thought they could.
Maybe we just don't have any brave volunteers at the moment. You can type in the chat if. So Mel's given a suggestion for one that I could do. So I'll have a go at reading out in the emotion that Mel's given and see if it sounds correct. So Mel said this emotion, so I'm going to say it's wet play today. So I don't know.
Oh, Lauren, that's amazing. That's awesome. Get me to the RSC.
Had lots of practice in front of children doing these kinds of activities. You have to make it really clear.
Yeah.
So that was confused. Hopefully we could tell that. I'm not sure at the moment if the microphone thing is working. It sounds like someone may have unmuted.
I think people can unmute if they want to.
Oh yes, so. We've got a hand up as well.
We have.
Pauline, yay! Would you like to have a go?
Yeah. It's wet play today.
Oh, lovely. Anybody want to guess what kind of emotion that was? Pauline, do you want to do it one more time for us?
It's wet play today.
Lovely. You guys, you can type in the chat bar if you want to guess. Otherwise, Helen and I might have to figure out. I think that was a fairly clear one from Pauline, what that sounded like.
I felt that might be bored.
Like, exactly. Yes.
Fantastic. I can see, Tracy said bored as well in the chat, so thank you for that. That was great. Thank you, Pauline. So you can kind of then have a discussion around how did Pauline make her voice sound really bored? What kind of pace did she say the sentence in? How did, you might even discuss what would her expression look like if you were doing it kind of face to face as well. And then that just sort of, again, really brings your attention to expression. You could also, the volume that Pauline said it in was quite quiet as well. So that's the discussion you could have with the children too about why might it be quieter? What kind of emotions would you maybe do a louder voice for? So it's just a nice way to really draw that attention, and that builds beautifully into inference when you're talking about character emotions, and getting children to really think about when they're reading out what a character said, how they're going to say their sentences as well. So those are a few activities for expression and volume, and then we've got some really great activities. So the this is also to do with phrasing, this kind of element of the activities, and lots of these activities are from Rosinski's work with Melissa Smith as well, from a fantastic book called The Mega Book of Fluency, which is really great. But they've got lots of ideas, as Helen said, to kind of build on fluency. So this one's a really fun one to do with just one child on their own, with a group of children, with the whole class. Again, it's quite nice to just do it a few times as well, because you can have different elements of it. So on the screen, there's the alphabet. And the idea is that to teach children to read and include the punctuation is to do a few of these silly activities. So this one's called phrasing nonsense, where you add in punctuation and see how that changes the rhythm, how that changes kind of how you say the alphabet. So you can do this with the alphabet, you can do it with numbers, you can do it with the same word. So you could have blah, 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 blah on the screen over and over again, and then add punctuation to it. So Helen, if you skip to the next page. So what I've done is I've had a go at putting in some punctuation. So at the top as well, just depending on kind of the age group that you want to do this with. So if it was, say, kind of key stage 1, so year 1 to children, so kind of 5-6-year-olds, you might just want to include maybe a full stop, a comma, and a question mark. So you might want to just start off with a few kind of punctuation marks, and then as they get a little bit older, so sort of those 6, 7, 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, even up to year 6, older children, you can start to include more of the punctuation in there. So I have put a colon in there, so you could put semicolons in there, you could put dashes in there, quotation marks, and think about how it might change kind of the way that the sentence is written, or that the sentences are written. So again, I'm going to see if anybody would like to have a go, otherwise I will have a go at reading this out myself. But would anybody like to have a go at reading the alphabet with those punctuation kind of marks in there? Again, moment of truth to see if anybody would like to volunteer. It's okay if not.
Well, I'm quite keen if no one else is.
I think
I'll have a go.
Oh yeah,
Hey,
thank you, Tracy.
well
Off you go.
I was just thinking this would be really fun to do with my reading group.
Ah, fantastic. Okay,
A,
let's
B,
see how you go.
C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, oh, can't see what's under that, R, S, T, U, now I've got a thing in front of it so I can't see it, V, V, W, X, Y, Z.
Very good.
Hey,
Thank you,
very
Tracy.
good.
I'm trying to see. It's got a bar across the last line.
Oh.
Oh no, sorry.
That's
I
better.
wonder why that is.
No, it keeps putting up my chat box and stuff in the middle.
Oh, okay,
Oh, I
yeah.
see. Oh no, you did that very, very well, considering you had some of it hidden. So well done, Tracy. That was fantastic. And yeah, you did it exactly how I would have done it as well, particularly with the questions. I think that's, teaching children to kind of inflect at the end of their sentences when they're when there's question marks. So that was demonstrated perfectly. So was the exclamation mark, not necessarily having to shout, but just putting some more emphasis and excitement into your voice. So thank you for that. As I said, yeah, that activity you can do with the alphabet, you can do it with random numbers, you can do it with a random word, you can do it with, if you wanted to just give a passage without any punctuation in and just see if the children can just play around with it. It's quite a fun activity to do. This is another one that I think works really, really well in terms of that kind of smoothness and recognition of words. So the idea is that you have a sentence, so it's so dark in this place, and then you give the young people kind of different ways to read the sentence, and again have that sort of discussion around how you might read the sentence and why you're changing your voice in different ways, whether you're speaking loudly or quietly, if you've changed the expression of your voice, and all those elements of fluency. One thing that's really good about this activity as well is that if you do have slightly nervous readers, or you have readers who struggle to decode, it's the same sentence repeated 4 or 5 or 6 times. So it means they get really familiar with the sentence or the passage, and that kind of fear of them not being able to read the sentence disappears, and they can focus on the fluency and start to kind of gain different meanings from it. So the first one, the situation, it shows you how to read it. So it's so dark in this place, you can read in different ways. So for example, the first one, you're underwater, so you can put your finger on your lips and wiggle them, and I'll see if this works. So it's so dark in this place, which is a really fun thing to do. And you can imagine just like even doing that with one child, but you can imagine a whole group of children all having a go at doing that, and then saying, oh, what did that sound like? Did that sound like you were underwater? What did that, and just having them all kind of laugh about it, I think is a really fun thing. The second one, you're in a spooky house, so it could be a bit more, a bit quieter. It's so dark in this place. You're trying to keep your voice lower, quieter, maybe a bit of a whisper falls into it. You're exploring a cave, it could be a bit more excited. It's so dark in this place. And just, explore. I won't go through every single one, but you get the idea of how you can change kind of the different situations. And then what you can also do is give the children the chance to come up with their own ones. So they might have, when you hear the phrase, it's so dark in this place, they might immediately think of somewhere that they know it's dark, and they can try and read the sentence and show how they would read it in a different situation. So again, just a really lovely one just to play around with, just a quick starter, or a little brain break in the middle of a reading session. And then finally, pace. So kind of similarly to the punctuation one, this is all about maybe showing children that sometimes they need to slow down a little bit, because I'm sure we've all come across young people who rush through when they're reading, and it's all about how to kind of teach them to be a little bit slower and talk about where the pauses would be and how that changes the meaning and adds to the meaning again. So we start off with a passage that has no punctuation in it at all, and then what you can do is with the child, you can kind of read it together, start reading out loud, and think, where would you put those kind of short pauses and where would you put those longer pauses in? And Helen, if you just flick to the next page for me, thank you. You can see that you can just use this really simple system of dashes or slashes, so 1 for a short pause and 2 for a slightly longer one. And again, this is a great one if you to kind of link in with reading and writing, because it looks at punctuation, and hopefully with the slightly older children, you could start to talk about whether it would be a comma, whether it would be maybe a dash, whether it would be a full stop, what kind of punctuation you could use. But for the younger children, it's a nice opportunity to just identify where full stops might go in a sentence. So it kind of links really nicely to writing as well. But in this Hansel and Gretel extract, again, I won't necessarily read it out, but you can see that it's broken up quite a lot, and as you read through it, there are quite a lot of pauses that you need, there are quite a lot of longer pauses that you need, and it's just teaching the children that you don't want to rush through and then not show any of the punctuation, because you start to lose the meaning in that. So I thought that's quite a nice activity to do with them as well. And then the final thing is, and actually Helen touched upon this earlier when she was talking about the poem that she was looking at from Robert Louis Stevenson, and the idea of choral reading, so getting children to read things together. So obviously in this situation, we're not talking necessarily about one-to-one reading, we're talking more to do with groups, a group of children, and it could be a whole class or it could be smaller groups. But again, this comes from Rosinski looking at different types of choral reading, where you can explore and find out kind of how the children get on with these different elements. I think always starting with something really simple like a nursery rhyme that they're going to be familiar with is a great way to kind of teach them the different techniques, and then you can move on to things that are a little bit more challenging for those children. So just to really briefly go through them, unison choral reading is just reading, everybody all reading at the same time. You can do refrain choral reading, which is where one person reads mostly on their own, but then at key points in a text, everyone joins in. So for example, if they were reading Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, someone would read most of it on their own, but as soon as it comes across Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, the whole class or the whole group would join in. You can have cumulative choral reading, which is kind of what it says on the tin, where you start with one child reads the first line, and then 2 children read the second, and then 3 children read the third, and so on and so forth. So it gets bigger and bigger as we go along. You can have call and response. So you can have split children into 2 groups. One group read line A, one group read line B, and then so on and so forth. So it's kind of call and response back and forward. Or you can do a line per child. So this is quite good, again, if you've got a group of children who don't necessarily want to read a big chunk all at once. They can read one line, and they know when their line is coming as well, so they can kind of practice it in their head before it gets to them, and then when it gets to them, they can say it out loud. And that is a really nice way to kind of assess children's fluency as well, if you do activities like that. And as Helen said, you could kind of use that as a baseline and then practice some different activities and kind of go back to it later. So yeah, there we go. Those are some activities, hopefully, that will help with building their fluency.
Awesome, thanks, Lauren. There's so many interesting ideas there, and then suddenly you come to a piece like this from the Iron Man, and you've got all sorts of tangible ideas behind what you can bring to it. And when we look at, you know, key bits of reading, and I think it's much better to do a little bit really well than to do a lot, always. And I made that mistake in teaching a lot when I first started teaching, trying to get lots and lots of stuff done. Well, that's not really particularly helpful some of the time. So I think it's more important that we do a little bit really well, and to take little paragraphs and nuggets and stanzas from reading material and produce a really beautifully fluent recital of it, you know, as a piece of choral reading, as an echo reading task, building the fluency for your children in whatever guise it is that you're working with children. Help them feel successful in little bite-sized chunks. And there's a huge amount of research behind the advantage of memorizing, and there's a nice link with memorizing here. It turns on the language device in our brains. It allows us to experience other ways of saying things and other patterns of vocabulary that we may not be familiar with, and it gives us those, and it embeds them within our own language. So things like this from the Iron Man, you could easily give us a little homework to memorize. Come back next week and be able to tell us this. But to memorize it with those fluency aspects that we've just been talking about will help that memorization process. And particularly pieces like this, where you've got rhetorical question, can be really interesting to play with. The Iron Man came to the top of the cliff. How far had he walked? Nobody knows. Where had he come from? Nobody knows. Taller than a house, the Iron Man stood at the top of the cliff, on the very brink, in the darkness. You've got absolute gold in your hands with extracts like that from books, and you don't need to do lots and lots. You just need to find the golden nuggets in the text that you're sharing with your children, or from pieces of poetry, or even from, you know, making it really relevant speeches that somebody said yesterday, or something you saw on social media that came around, or a news article. Find the little bits of gold and transform them into fluent reading that comes to life, because that's actually the huge benefit, isn't it, to fluent reading, is that it leads to fluent speaking. That fluency really has an interchangeable element. So I hope that's been helpful, and Lauren, those ideas were just fabulous. Thank you. We've got one more of these webinars left in our autumn series, and that is next Tuesday, and that will be about word power. So do come along and join us for that. If you haven't signed up already, you'll find those links on our social medias. But I'll stop the share now, because we've got some time for Q&A. So do feel free, if you have a question, if you want to put it on the chat box, or just pop your hand up, or just unmute, just come and join in, then we can have a conversation about any questions you might have. We've got one question there already, Lauren. What sort of reading age would you start this with?
So I guess, I mean,
Well, that was about-
reading age, yeah, I don't know if that was to do with the particular activities, but I think
Yeah.
just in general, kind of fluency, I think you can start with children as soon as they start reading, to be perfectly honest, because obviously there are certain activities that you wouldn't necessarily make as challenging. So, you know, the activity I showed you where you put punctuation in, you might not do that with anything other than full stops to begin with, or you might just go with really simple sentences if there's a child that's in their very early stages of reading, their reading journey. Doing those activities with the emotions is a really great one, and again, you can give them a limited number, so it could a limited amount of emotions, so it could just be happy, sad, scared, and you know, the emotions that would fit with their experiences at that time. But I would say, yeah, you can. I would start as early as they start reading aloud, just throwing in a few of these little ideas and thinking about expression is really, really useful for them. I don't know if you agree, Helen.
Yes, definitely, absolutely. I think, and also it doesn't need to be bad. You know, you can do this with picture books, can't you? You can bring fluent ideas to life through speech, through talk, from the images in a picture book. So I'm not even sure we need to be bound by words sometimes, because that fluency concept starts so young, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. Yeah, really good point about the picture books, definitely.
Any other questions? Don't be shy, just jump in, that's fine, or pop them on the chat box. But if not, then it's time for a cup of tea, Lauren.
Definitely.
Well, here we go.
Oh,
Something from Tracy. I'm a TA, but I do one-to-one sessions for struggling readers and often read the sentence page depending on how many words to them. Great.
Yeah.
And have them read it back. Fantastic. Difficult for parents to understand. I wonder, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of evidence to say that the value of being read to is enormous. So yes, you just carry on and read to them is really important, and then getting them to mirror back is really, really valuable, because it's little and often, isn't it? And showing them that real great reading model is so valuable and so helpful.
100%. And I think just kind of, as Helen said, like modeling that to children, it shows them kind of how to actually form the word and, you know, express themselves as well. But it also would help with the sight reading. So if they, you know, they might already know how to read the sentence on the page, but already feeling quite nervous about it. And as soon as you've read it out and they go, oh, actually, I was right, it builds their confidence, and also means then that they don't have to worry about it when it's their turn to have a go. So I think that's a really great thing that you're doing there, Tracy.
Yeah. Lauren, I've just seen that if anyone looks at this chat box and doesn't know the activities you were doing, someone said they're confused and someone said they're bored. So hopefully people knew about that. Oh, thanks, Pauline. I found Michael Rosen's Mr. Wrong quite good. Almost interrupting with the word wrong. The poems are with Bookmark. Great stuff.
Great, thanks, Pauline.
Brilliant. Well, thank you everybody for coming along. We hope you can join us for the last one next week. And it's been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, and thanks for joining in as well.
Yeah, good stuff.
Thank
And
you.
great acting there, Lauren.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.